This is Cross Culture Podcast with Belle Tyndall and Lauren Windle,
where we talk pop culture and current affairs from a Christian perspective.
We are back. Hey, Windle.
Hey, what a week it's been in the world.
It's been a big old week. Taylor Swift's Eras tour's coming to an end.
Is it? In my consciousness, that ended a long time ago because she's been and gone from Europe, so less relevant.
No. It's still
Is
going
she still
in
in
America.
Europe? Oh, right.
No, she's not in Europe. She's in America, but it's coming to an end. And
it's the end of an era.
I was just about to say, my boss called it the end of an era.
When you say your boss, do you mean Graham Tomlin? Or
no, I mean Nick Jones, our senior editor, senior unseen.
Yeah.
I was just in an editorial meeting with him and I was like, Taylor Swift's thing is coming to an end, because obviously that's all I ever want to write about. And he said, oh, at the end of an era. And then we had this conversation about how in culture in general, it feels a little bit like we're in the shifting of an era.
Okay.
For lots of reasons, but of course the main old big fat reason being Donald Trump.
We're gonna trump it up, aren't we?
We're gonna trump it up, yeah.
Give me out of 10. When you woke up on the morning of Wednesday, how did you feel? Did you jump out of bed full of glee, or were you more, if that's a 10 and one is actually didn't get out of bed that day, which one are you?
I did. So my brain woke me up at around 4 a.m. It's like it knew something was up. And I knew it would do that because it does tend to do that when news is going to come in overnight. The chances are my brain's going to wake me up to find it out. So I woke up at around 4 and he hadn't won yet, but it was looking bad. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to go back to sleep.
I got up at 6 and the writing was pretty much on the wall. Yeah. There were a few people going, oh, who knows, could swing it. But
it was like, no. Yeah. Basically, if 1 is not getting out of bed at all and 10 was jumping out with glee, I was a 2 or a 3. I did get out of bed, but it took me an hour of doom scrolling. Do you know who really upset me?
Oh, go on.
But just because he's my anchor. So, how when you're on a turbulent flight and it's a bit bumpy and, people tell you, look at the cabin crew, and if they're calm, you can be calm.
Oh, no, who wasn't calm?
Rory
Stewart.
Yeah. The first thing I woke up to, right, on that second time of waking up at around 6:30 a.m, I saw a clip. The first thing on my Instagram feed was a clip of Rory, and he's just saying Trump has pretty much won. And then he's outlining, he's looking to win the public vote, he's looking to win the House of Representatives, he's looking to win all of these things.
Yeah.
And then Rory says, I know I sound very calm, but I need you all to know that I am shattered that this has happened. And I was like, Rory, don't you say that, because if you're shattered, we need to be shattered.
Yeah.
I need you to be calm so I can
I
be calm.
suggest that Jesus should be your anchor instead of Rory Stewart?
You can suggest that. And in all things other than politics, maybe he is.
Yeah. Look, I went through the long reads on most of the big thinky sites over the weekend, and virtually every women's magazine has got a what does Trump's presidential election mean for women in the world and in the US. It's a shame that someone being elected should pose such big questions for such a huge part of the population. But there we go. And what I don't want to do, right, is just spend an hour just bashing Trump, because we are where we are. I think anyone who's listened to this for any length of time would know that he wouldn't have been my choice. But God can take surprising situations and do incredible things with them. So, I kind of feel like people who are still banging the drum that he shouldn't be president, it's like, I'm tired, I'm tired. He is president. We move on, and that's it.
Yeah.
Look, I've got thoughts about it. I've read up. I've done a bit of the old doom scrolling myself. Some of it doomy, some of it actually worth reading. Sure. And when you think about it, right, whether you support Trump or not, you can agree it's pretty remarkable that he, as a convicted felon, has been elected to the highest office in the country. So whether you think that is a good thing or a bad thing, we can agree it is exceptional circumstances, right?
If it was a movie, you would be like, this is a sociologically fascinating movie. Do you know what
It
I
would
mean?
be like Charlie Brooker had written a movie,
Yeah,
a Black Mirror type
it
movie.
really is. So, like, sociologically, this will be studied for decades, centuries, maybe, how this
Okay,
happened.
I agree. And this is part. So, as I was reflecting on this, I did a big drive this morning. And as I was reflecting on it, and I listened to Lily Allen and Makita Oliver talk about it on Miss Me, their podcast,
Yeah.
and I've read up, blah, blah, blah. Here's my 2 cents, right? And part of this has come from some time on Andrew Tate's Twitter or X. I just dead named Twitter, sorry. X this week. Okay. And this this is, I've been thinking so much about this, right? We're in an era, in this, like, in the UK kind of Piers Morgan led era, where expertise means nothing. Truth
Mm,
almost is like, you can have peer review, you can have sense on your side. And it's almost like we're a bit bored of expertise and stuff like that, right? And I was on Andrew Tate's X. Basically, he said that this election, it's men versus gays and chicks, is his way. Like, real men, effectively, his message would be voting for Trump. The gays
yes.
and the girls will be voting against Trump. And that's just like, anyway, and maybe when we get all of the stats through, maybe if I'd sat down to look through the polls, maybe he'd be
Mm,
right, because there was a huge number of young men who showed up at the polls to vote for Trump. And as I sort of reflect on this, right, I'm going to read you something. Andrew Tate, by the way, I don't know how he gets anything done other than posting on social media. The amount he posts in a day is
so
absolutely.
many people like that where I think, don't you have jobs?
It's like, well, I guess he doesn't like it. Kind of just
Mm,
saying stuff is kind of his job. Maybe I've
what a dream.
misunderstood this, but I think just expressing his personal opinion
Is what
is
he's paid
Andrew
for.
Tate's job. In which case, he is a very diligent worker, I would say. So I scrolled a bit back, and what I got to was his exercise regime. And he did one of those things like, if this gets 2,000
Mm,
retweets, I'll share my health and fitness tips with you. And I thought, look, the guy's obviously quite ripped. He obviously does a lot of weights, whatever. Like, I wonder what his exercise regime is. And the first thing he started with, disclaimer, absolutely none of the advice I give is based on any kind of evidence. I don't care what the Matrix says is true or not via a study. Many things may be contrary to science. I don't want to see studies or hear opinions. I do not care, capital letters. I'm posting what works for me. And that's it, right? And that's how he started. And then he goes on to say that you should have at least 5 coffees a day, 7 days a week. You should be a highly caffeinated person.
wow.
He smokes a lot. Don't eat sugar. Even fruit is basically a trick. You're lazy if you're not like pumping iron every day of the week. He actually says that there's healing power in a hug, which was quite cute. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he basically said, caffeine in cigarettes will keep you on edge. You should have one meal a day. Caffeine in cigarettes will keep you on edge. And that's good, because we should be on edge. We should be angry all the time, kind of thing. If you're a real man,
Mm,
that's what you would do. And there's lots of obscenities, and it's like a 20 tweet long sort of post. So it's all of this kind of stuff. But what fascinates me is that what he's saying is outrageous, but because he's said that disclaimer, like, I don't care if this is what you consider to be true, this is what you consider to be science, I don't care, I'm just going to tell you what I think. It's a bit Trumpian, right? Like, I'm just
mm,
going to say stuff, and I think we trust it more because they're not claiming to be based on anything. They're not saying, having reviewed all the evidence, here's my, I've tried to be unbiased, here's my opinion. They're
mm.
going, I am biased, I haven't listened to the evidence, who gives a, whatever, and here's what I've got to say. And actually, I think people don't necessarily find what Trump says refreshing. They find the fact that he says it refreshing. They don't agree or believe, but they're like, finally, someone who just says whatever. There's authenticity to saying whatever just comes into your head, you know?
That's
What?
very, yeah, populist, isn't it? I guess. So when Trump says something like, I was about to do his voice, I'm so
No, do
not going to
it,
do
do
it.
it, do it,
No,
do
I've
it.
never done that before. I don't know why that was just an instinct in my head, like something I could pull out of my locker when I've literally never even tried. But when he says things like, I will end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, So what you're saying is people don't care whether that's true or not because, come on, obviously it's not. What they like is the fact that he would even say that in the first place, as
I
opposed to
don't think
Kamala
anyone believes
Harris.
he'll do it. I don't think anyone
Yeah.
believes he'll do it. He's not going to be held accountable for these claims. And I don't think he expects to be held accountable either, in the same way that Kamala Harris would have been. People don't think
Mm.
what he says has weight, but they don't care.
But in which case, what do they think it's actually going to look like for him to be president? If it's
I
not going to
don't,
look like what he says it's going to look like, but they voted him in anyway, what do they actually want from him? It's baffling.
I don't know. I kind of wonder if it's a bit like when we all voted for Boris Johnson to be mayor of London. What did we want from him? What did we think he was going to do? No one really knew. They just wanted that novelty figure to assume the position. It's not like
Sure.
any, he wasn't voted for based on the merit of his campaign, or he would say otherwise. And I've
Yeah.
just read his book and he does say otherwise. But I think, just like, yeah, let's just
Yeah.
get in that guy. That guy's a bit
Yeah.
different. Let's get
Yeah.
him in. Let's see what happens. Let's throw a cat amongst the pigeons.
It's just like pure populism, isn't it? Yeah. Where obviously, I am not. So I would be in opposition to, if I was in America, I wouldn't have voted for Trump. And therefore, I would have been in like opposition to the
Would
government
you
that's
have
about to
voted
come
for
in.
Kamala Harris? Would you have voted Democrat? Or would you have done like a Green or an independent? Or would you have
Yeah.
spoiled
No,
the ballot?
I think in America, I would feel that it would be too high stakes for that. I
You'd
think I
have
would
to
have,
choose one or the
I
other.
think I would have had to have chosen one or the other, and it never in my life would have been Trump. So I guess it would have been Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it's a little bit different in the UK. I live in Bristol. A lot of people voted Green, and Green actually got in. Great. I think it's too high stakes in America to do that.
When I lived
But
in Brighton, I voted Green because,
yeah,
like, when
because
in
it can
Rome, do
actually
you know what I
happen, right?
mean? Yeah, exactly. Like
Be a
everyone
little
else did.
chameleon. Yeah. Um, so before the election result came out, I was asked to write a piece called The Utter Miracle of Disliking an Election Result.
Mm.
And I wrote it obviously not knowing who was going to win, but just knowing that there was going to be a huge number of people for whom it was
Mm-hmm.
going to be a bad old
Either
day.
way, it was going to be
Either
hard, yeah.
way. And so, what I was asked to do was reflect on an interview that I did for the Reenchanting podcast in the summer, just before our general election in the UK. And it was with Luke Brotherton. So, he's a political theologian. He's now based at Oxford. He's a genius. And I remember that episode, having that conversation with him, calmed me the heck down so much pre-UK election. And so it was joy. Like it felt like the most gracious commission to be like, just go and listen to that conversation
Mm.
again before this and calm yourself down, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And he says this wonderful thing where, and this is, in a way, it's like, of course, this is glaringly obvious, but in another way, I appreciate the way he said it so much. Is he was like, politics is literally just forming a common life with others. We need each other in order to live any kind of flourishing life. But when you need to live in community, you will come up against people with major differences and with whom you have major disagreement. And then he basically looked into history and he said, therefore, we have four options when that happens. We can kill them. We can coerce them. We can treat them so badly we cause them to flee. And he was saying throughout the vast majority of human history, those three options have been the chosen options.
Yeah.
Or we can do politics. And so what he was saying was it's an absolute miracle and so rare and so recent that we have decided the best thing to do is do politics instead. And so he talks about like the absolute beauty of what he called the loyal opposition or agitational solidarity. So this notion that we would wake up to something like Donald Trump becoming president and we wouldn't cause absolute anarchy.
Okay, so we would wake up and not opt for murder.
That's
Wait, hang on.
exactly it.
Not opt for murder, making him miserable, or trying to
Yeah.
manipulate him.
That's
They're
exactly
the other
it.
three options. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
And so Luke says, like, this is the water we swim in. And so we don't see the miracle of that, the miracle of agitational solidarity. But he says the notion that we would actually still stay and be like, we are opposed to you in every possible way, but we are still going to do that without violence and without coercion. We're still going to try and build something better. We're still going to be in opposition well. And he was just like, that's a miracle. Just take a moment. That's
So
a
good.
miracle. It's such like a balm.
So good. I keep picking it up and putting it down. But Liz Oldfield's book, Fully Alive, which I fully intend to put on this when I finished it. I haven't
Yes.
finished it yet.
I've read that. So when you're ready, give me a
Oh
holler and we
yeah.
will chat our butts off about it.
She had an example in there of a guy who I can't remember who it was, and I think it was America, and he was a civil rights campaigner. I think he might have been related to Martin Luther King in some way. But anyway, it was when they had just desegregated schools in a state somewhere. He'd gone to speak to a head teacher of a desegregated school, but the teacher still believed in segregation. So even though sort of legally he had to, integrate, he still believed in segregation as an individual, as a person. And she talked about the dynamic of that conversation. And actually, rather than going in with the anger that, and I need this guy's name because it's so bad to say that he did something amazingly and not actually credit him, but to go in with the anger and the hurt of that, how dare you kind of feeling, like, why would you put a child at a disadvantage just over something that they have no control over, blah, blah, blah. But actually he sat and he just listened. He heard this guy out. And that meant that guy softened and was able to explain some of his personal fears, some of his personal concerns, some of the prejudices that were quite ingrained with him. And it basically came down to, like, that's how we've always done it. Yeah. And then he was able to introduce, he could then see that this person wanted good, wanted justice, but had a different framework for what that looked like, and was able to say, like, okay, but do you think that that's the kindest way to treat people? And it was a totally transformational conversation for him. But he didn't go in all guns blazing. He allowed that guy to have differences.
Yeah.
And that's really hard.
Really, I don't do it very well. Like I'll put my hands up, but I don't do it very well. I've got so many stories of me not doing that. The inverse of that story. I've got stories of me doing that, like really recent ones as well. But I think so. I'm really challenged by this idea that me feeling totally dissatisfied, disillusioned, disappointed, scared at this result is proof, even though it feels upside down, is proof of a good thing working. Do you know, like a heart, like, and that's hard. Yeah. So I'm trying to be like, and again, I have failed at this, but I'm trying to be like, okay, how do I actively react? Like, what does it mean for me then, therefore, to react to this? And I think we could maybe all do a bit of that. Like, to not just go where the tide is going, which is to division and populism and all of this kind of stuff. Like, what do we do? What do we do now? Yeah, it's very.
I think that that's really good.
Yeah.
I think what I'm choosing to do is that thing from Shaun of the Dead where he's like, I'm just going to go to the pub and sit it out. Wait for it all to blow over. He can't, you only get 2 tries at this job. He can't get the application form next time.
That's true. Just wait out the 4 years.
Ride out 4 years and we're done, guys.
We're done. Have you seen that meme that just says, what I wouldn't give for some precedented times? And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'd love some precedented times.
Oh, I'd lap up some precedented times right now.
I feel like 2019 was the last precedented era that I lived through.
Yeah. Although I think Donald Trump was president in 2019.
Oh yeah, hang on then. So it would be pre-Brexit.
Pre-Brexit.
Be pre-Brexit. When was Brexit? Was it 2016?
2016. So we're talking like the early 2010s.
Early 2010s, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Precedented.
Do you remember 2012 and all we had to worry about was the Olympics in London?
That was a good time for the UK. I actually didn't live in the UK in 2012. And I was, so 2012, April 2012, I got sober. So I'd say not my finest hour. Oh no, I suppose making the decision to get sober was pretty fine. But yeah, a bit of a messy year. On my side, but I think the times were precedented. I mean, to have gone through such personal turbulence with the unprecedented times could have been a bit too much for me. So maybe that's a storm. Maybe that's a gift.
Yeah. Oh gosh, right.
Have you engaged with anything not Trump an election this week?
I have. So basically, what's happened in the rest of my life is I've been making myself feel better.
Oh, lovely.
Just feel cozy. And so what I've really gotten onto right now, because it is November, mid-November, Halloween's gone, bonfire night gone, Remembrance Day
I love that we didn't talk about Halloween as well, because I don't want to, I don't care.
Yeah, fair enough. It does sort of pass me by.
Yeah, we just didn't even, we're like, yeah, we totally talk about pop culture and current affairs. Didn't even mention Halloween.
Oops,
So
Halloween. Yeah. Well, I didn't do anything. I think the best Halloween special of anything is Motherland, and let that be my Halloween offering.
I've not watched it. Oh, wait, hang on. I've watched Motherland. What happens in the Halloween special? When they go trick or treating?
When they go trick or treat, and I just think
Okay, I
it's
need to
great.
rewatch
And
it.
the mum basically like hijacks it to go and try and find Lee Mead. You know that actor? He's on Holbeat, like a proper
Oh,
like
yeah.
Z-lister actor, and yet the whole episode is around him.
Yes.
Anyway, that's my only Halloween offering I've got
It's
content
my
wise.
dad's birthday, so I just celebrate
Oh,
my dad's birthday.
yeah, it's just trumped,
That's
yeah.
it.
But anyway, we've ticked off all of those things in the calendar, right?
Mm,
Which means that
mm.
now it's time to get Christmas adjacent.
I've been Christmas adjacent since September.
Have you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I eat mince pies outrageously early.
Yes, I've just started eating mince pies. We have a little competition going in my small group. Oh, I'm so Christmas
Wait,
adjacent, it
what's the
hurts.
competition to eat them first?
No, basically, just everyone brings a different brand of mince pie
Oh.
a week.
Or in that case, can I suggest that you try
It's
the
actually my turn this week, so this couldn't be more perfect. Go on.
there's puff pastry topped mince pies from the bakery section in Co-op that I think are really good.
Ah,
And I tell
okay.
you what I've got right next to me. I
Yeah.
mentioned last week that Dolly Parton was on the cover of Good Housekeeping. Well,
Yes.
they've taste tested like every mince pie in the land. So I can tell you what Good Housekeeping say is the
Please
best
do
ones.
give me the top one because this is a competition I could win, and those don't come around very
Oh,
often.
yeah, I
So,
love that. Okay, the best classic mince pie with a Good Housekeeping rating of 88
yeah.
out of 100, and they tested 55. Okay,
Wow.
they've gone
Okay.
in,
This is thorough.
is Aldi specially selected mince pies, £2.29 for six. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's where I'm gonna go.
19 for 12, so way more expensive. The runner-up classic was
Mm.
Fitzbilly's classic mince pies. And then the best ones with a twist were Booth's Viennese topped.
Oh, now I did have a Booths last week, but it wasn't the Viennese topped. That sounds
Mm.
good.
Yeah.
Basically, do you want to know a secret? I don't really like mince pies, so anything that like shakes them up makes me forget I'm eating a mince pie, I'll take.
I love mince pies. I tell you what, the
Mm,
issue for me is though, Christmas is like a minefield for alcoholics because you
sure.
think an item of food is alcohol free. And my goodness, you are often wrong at
Yeah.
Christmas.
Brandy and everything.
Yeah, I can't have the cranberry sauce because someone's put a snifter of port in it.
Mm.
Mince pies, they're always sneaking stuff into those. There's brandy butter custard. Can't it just be custard? No, it can't. Here's some whiskey or something in it. It's
Here's some
relentless.
tequila for your
Yeah.
custard.
Even the ham is like slow gin soaked
Yeah,
or
sure.
something. And you're like, just give us a break. Just,
Yeah.
save yourself some money and don't soak it in alcohol for once.
Yeah. Right. Well, I feel, seeing as you've been eating mince pies for a couple of months now, I feel
Mm.
absolutely fine about how much Christmas adjacent content I've been consuming. So I made myself a Christmas adjacent playlist a few years ago. Yeah. And I listen to that every November.
But wait, when you say adjacent, you mean that they're not actually Christmas songs?
No, like Christmas is a cameo in these songs.
So, okay, so for example, the first song that came to my mind is East 17. Stay now, stay.
That could be one.
Because
Yeah.
it's not actually a Christmas song, but
Nothing
in
but
the
Christmas though.
video,
Yeah. They're just in big
they're
puffers.
standing in puffer jackets. I think
Yeah.
it's snowing, so
Yeah.
it's kind of
That's exactly the vibe. So, like, Baby It's Cold Outside, there's actually no mention of Christmas. Let It Snow,
that's no,
there's no mention of
these are
Christmas.
legit Christmas songs.
There's no mention of Christmas in these songs, right? Anything that's ever featured on a John Lewis advert ever, no
Well,
mention of
because
Christmas.
is that because they can't be religious then? So they just make it snowy or snowman or
Yeah, they're just like, yeah, but they'll still
Frosty
give
the
you all the
Snowman
vibes
is
you
a
want.
Christmas song, right? Are we agreed on that at least?
Well, I don't know. You can have snow in January.
Okay, so what for you constitutes they have to say the word
Yeah,
Christmas.
yeah,
That's the only thing.
pretty much. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas straight in.
Okay, fine. On Christmas adjacent stuff, then,
Yeah.
I saw on Governor B's Instagram that he's already put up his Christmas tree and that he and his kids were watching a film that he says is a Christmas film,
Mm,
which was Cool Run-Ins. So I
no.
I can't believe I Googled is Cool Runnings a Christmas film? Number one, the first thing that came up was a poll that Governor B had put up a few years ago on Twitter, and 75% of his followers said it was.
How?
Well, I guess it's very snowy. It's
Yeah,
bobsleds,
fair
it's
enough. It's
winter, right?
bobsleds. Okay, well, I would call that Christmas adjacent.
Okay.
There's
Would
this
you call Die
subcategory.
Hard Christmas
Yeah.
adjacent? No,
So
that
I
is just
also,
Christmas.
no, that's Christmas adjacent. So I also have this list of films that I'll watch as well, because I'm fully
Okay.
willing to get into Christmas, but I want to ease myself into it, right?
Oh my gosh, this is like the warm up. This is the stretching
That's
before the
exactly what this
exercise.
is. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to pull a muscle. You're going to pull a Christmas muscle and you'll just get sick of it. So, Little Women, Narnia, Die Hard,
Narnia, you can have. Little Women, I don't see why, just because it's a
Little
classic
Women's,
film.
it's got a nice bit of Christmas in there. It's got a nice
Okay.
dollop of Christmas in
Well,
there.
I suppose all films that kind of go through seasons will have some sort
Exactly.
of Christmas in.
Bridget Jones,
Oh, but
perfect
Bridget Jones
Christmas
ends
adjacent.
in the snow.
Yeah, it starts at
That's
Christmas and it ends in the snow. Christmas
okay.
adjacent. All of the Nora Ephrons, but we won't dwell on those because I know how you
She's
feel.
had too much airtime.
She
She's
has,
had too
yeah.
much airtime from
But
us, Nora.
she's on my list as well. So
Harry
basically,
Potter.
yes.
Harry Potter. Okay, because
Now we're
yeah,
flowing.
yeah. Okay,
Harry
so
Potter.
I've done a Harry Potter rewatch, and I'm up to so I've watched the first five. The first two are truly shocking acting, and I
Truly
don't.
rubbish.
I'm not bringing any brand new information to anyone here, but I think the third one they definitely upped their game. There'd been some sort of instruction in between because it was
Yeah.
like dramatically different.
It was. I think this is a fact from my brother, and I don't. It has details that I don't know, but he would. But they got in a new director for number three, I think, to switch the vibe, to change it from a slightly twee children's film into like a young adult franchise. And I do think
Okay.
successfully number three does that. You're right.
Oh yeah, it
It's a
gets darker,
dramatic,
doesn't it?
super dark, bit cool, like a bit more vibey, bit more
Yeah.
edgy. But yeah, any Harry Potter will do on the Christmas adjacent
Yeah.
train.
Okay, got
I'll
it.
take it.
I'm just happy when Christmas kicks off, basically.
Yeah.
And I am deliberating whether or not to put my tree up now. I've seen loads of people are doing it. Loads of people have
Yeah.
already put their trees up. But I've got so many ideas for Christmas this year. So I've bought a American style mailbox that I'm going to put outside my house so that local kids can post their letters to Santa. Ah, how
And then are
cute.
you going to like peek at them? You're going to read them?
Well, if they include their address, then I'll write back from Santa.
Wow.
Is
Okay.
that
That's
too
really,
weird?
no, but that's really something to put on your plate in what is
But I mean,
notoriously a busy month.
how many local kids are going to actually post in it? Do you think that that's going to end up being a nightmare?
It might. There's only one way to find out. Do it. Let us all know how it goes.
I will. Well, I will. I'll let you know in January when I'm back. I would say rather than deliberately engaging with Christmas or Christmas adjacent content, I have just been in an increasingly Christmassy mindset and sort of planning. And also, honestly, getting Good Housekeeping with Dolly Parton on the cover has got me well pumped because it's got
I bet.
tablescapes, it's got Christmas
Oh.
wreaths, it's got recipes, all the Christmas good stuff that you associate with the season. But I have been engaging with some other stuff. Can I ask you, did you watch Baby Reindeer?
Oh, I started it and then I started it as like some other people I know were further ahead and they kind of told me what happens and then I
Okay.
chickened out.
Okay, so you wanted the funny,
Yeah, it wasn't what
like,
I
isn't
thought it
this
was going to
weird?
be.
Someone's a little bit too attentive, and there's some
Yes,
funny anecdotes that come from it, not the
exactly
deep,
that. And I
tense.
will go back to it because I hear like it's an incredible piece of storytelling, etc., etc. But I need to psych myself up for it.
Oh, I think as a writer, it's masterful, absolutely masterful. I think that often you lose your audience when you change tact so quickly, when you go from something that's a bit off key, but
Mm,
ultimately humorous and switch to something that's very serious. And I don't want to,
yeah.
like, for people who haven't watched it, I won't say exactly how that happens. But yeah, there's a tone shift that I think would usually either frustrate, outrage, or just turn off people who are watching or reading or whatever the medium is. And he did not do that. He managed to build to it in an exceptional way. Also, it ties into this whole new era, which isn't actually that new anymore, of like characters that you care about but actually aren't that good. the
Yeah.
Fleabag characters.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can see their humanity, you can see the good things in them, but rather than the sort of Disney, here's the good guy, here's the bad guy, everyone's a bit complex.
Right. Okay.
Everyone is to be cared for gently, has
Mm,
vulnerability, and is a bit messed up
okay.
for a plethora of reasons. Some you know, some you don't. So that sort of mix of compassion and revulsion at characters, I think, is really good. But GQ's long read at the moment on their website is an interview with Richard Gadd, who wrote it. And it raised a few things for me. First off, I write often about my own personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a trial and error thing, right? And I don't like that in the media, magazine writing and stuff like that, often women are pressured to write about their personal experience. Like I've worked at newspapers, and somebody, a freelance journalist who I know, who I worked with for years, put out a call out on their social media this week saying something like, looking for women who have taken Ozempic, which is the injectable appetite suppressant to lose
Yeah.
weight that has been in the press a lot recently, who lied to their friends about it.
Wow.
Contributors would need to be named and they would be paid, right? So it's just this kind of entitlement to people's, and obviously people are going to volunteer for that. No one's like twisting your arm. You put yourself forward, you take your 100 quid, you share
Mm,
your story. But there was a part of me that's like, if they won't tell their mates, why would they put that in the press? But I'm sure that they found people, because that's what tabloid journalism is. You always find someone for stories like that. And it's been a trial and error, in Christian writing. What is right to share?
yep.
Because testimony is powerful.
Yep.
And where do I draw the line? And I gave a talk at the Jubilee Plus conference this weekend. Jubilee Plus is a incredible charity that encourage churches and Christians and organizations to incite helpful change, particularly for people in poverty. And I was speaking about the intersection and the injustice of poverty and addiction, and how you're more likely to be an addict, you'll find it harder to get
Yeah.
into recovery and harder to stay in recovery if you're from a lower socioeconomic group. And towards the end, when I was talking about like actually how it feels to be somebody from a community that is very complex, and how it feels to be embraced or not embraced by the church, and I just burst into tears. And I've definitely had like a classy, meaningful tear roll down a cheek before in a moment of passion during speaking. In
A
a,
well-timed
yeah, like, and this
well
is just not
tear.
right in God's kingdom. And you can see I'm welling up, and you're like, wow, she just really cares. And I'm like, yeah, have some of that power. And then there's what I did this week.
Which was sob on stage.
Yeah, just like
Yeah.
barely get through the final
Yeah.
bit of the
Yeah.
talk. So what he shares about in this interview is like, he accepted the vulnerability of sharing. I don't think you can
Mm,
ever really, it's like having kids. You cannot prepare yourself
no.
for going public in the media with something that is incredibly vulnerable. And when I first wrote about my recovery in the Daily Mail and the Sun, I remember the comments on Facebook, like, I bet she was effectively like having sex with strangers in order to pay for it. They didn't use that tactful language. People commenting on my weight as if it was about my weight. People commenting on the way I looked. People saying horrible things about me. And actually, even on I've got a few reels that have gone viral recently, and I get people telling me how ugly I am all the time on Instagram. All the
Wow.
time. So I don't even read. If you comment something nice on one of my pictures these days, I won't reply, because I as a matter of principle, do not read comments, because some of them are so bad that it's not worth reading the good ones to
Mm,
get there. So it's this sort of question of vulnerability and the need to share vulnerably in order to be invited to share at all, that is often put on women, but obviously Richard experienced it. And also the vulnerability that he imposed on the other people in the story, who are real people. And the Scottish woman who was his stalker, and that's the premise, is that there's a woman who's stalking him.
yeah.
She's suing Netflix for 130 million pounds.
I saw that. Yeah, that's the
She's
one
so
thing.
identifiable.
So identifiable. Yeah, this is an interesting topic that I hadn't thought about. So I was offered for a magazine once, I was offered a column, a monthly column, and I put forward this deeply personal topic. And the editor actually, in her grace, turned it down. She really protected me from that for that precise reason. She
Mm.
was like, I don't want you to have to write about this every month. forever. Like, no, I'm actually
Mm.
going to protect you from yourself. And I think I'm very much in that early stage of my career where I will sort of serve myself up on a platter a little bit in that,
Mm.
as particularly because, we were talking earlier about how do we react to the changing times and the changing cultural landscape. And one of the things I feel quite challenged to do as a Christian who, and this is quite ironic, like considering what I do, but who doesn't actually like talking about your Christianity very much to people who aren't Christians. I really struggle. I wrote a piece once called
Mm.
Confessions of a Closet Christian, and that really is the story of my life. As someone who finds that hard, I actually feel challenged recently. I feel like God's saying, I want you to do a little bit more of that, of writing about Christianity so that there are counter voices out there. And so it's a very real struggle for me right now because it's like, what do you put out there about your own life, about your own faith, about your own doubts, about your
Mm.
own struggles? Where's the line between it being a good piece of writing that's raw and as honest as possible, which I will always try and be, and just protecting yourself? And I think, me and you are thinking about this as writers, but actually this plays into like your social media. If you're just an average person on social media, I think you still
Mm.
have to ask yourself these same questions. Just how
Yeah.
do you show up authentically, but protect yourself?
Everyone has an opportunity to have a public facing persona these days,
Yeah.
right? And I would say with social media, that is a balance that I feel comfortable and confident that I've struck okay. So you
Mm.
never see pictures of anyone I'm dating on my social media because I will not. I think if you are going to take people on a step by step of your relationship, particularly when I've already invited people into my love life by writing notes on love, then you owe them a step by step of your breakup. I don't think you can have it both ways,
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
horrible is that? And as
Mm.
somebody who's just been in a long-term relationship and experienced a breakup, and I was challenged by a church leader, like, but you're not talking about your dating journey, you're on a panel talking about this, and this, but you won't say that you're in a relationship. And I'm like, no, I won't. And then when we broke up, I honestly, hands and knees, thanked God. Because to
Yeah.
have to put out a story and be like, hi, that guy who's been on my Instagram for the past year and, year and a half, like, oh, I don't want your kind messages. I'm not doing that. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Never. So there's that. I share my friends with their permission. So I have put a message out to say, once my following got over sort of 5,000, to the key people who I post with me, I've said, the internet is nasty. Some of these things are starting to reach beyond our circle. This is an opt out. If you never want your face to be on my Instagram, tell me now. So I know who's okay. I never post people's children. And when it comes to what I share what is relevant for my work, which is truly me, but it's probably 40% of me and my life. And I keep the other 60% private. And that I'm so comfortable with.
Yeah. That feels like it. These are rules, yeah, that we all in our little sphere probably need to come up with, I think.
I think so. I think, you, for example, your platform is only going to continue to grow because you are doing podcasts. You've got other projects which will involve some publicity coming out in the future. It doesn't mean that you're going to be like hundreds of thousands of
What?
followers and stuff
I
like that.
am. That's why I'm doing it all. Sorry? That's what was sold to me.
But you will have already following you on social media people who don't know you personally because they have an interest in what you speak and write about, right? And even if that's 10 people, if those 10 people were in
It's
a
12.
room, 12 people, if they were in a room listening to you, you'd still think through, like, okay, these are
Yes.
12 people and it's a one-way conversation. What is
Yeah.
sensible for me to share?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we all need to think through what is sensible for me to share. What am I happy sharing? In my writing, I don't think in my writing, when I'm writing books, I've got more time to reflect on it.
Mm.
There's one chapter in each of my books that I wrote and didn't read back until like edit time. And when I
Right.
had
Okay.
absolutely had to read it back. And I think for both of them, I mainly engaged with them a second time when I read the audiobook because they were just so painful to write. And I checked them like with my mum first to be like, is this mental? And she was like, no, keep them in. And one was a diary I kept more or less of the process of a breakup in Notes on Love, and in Notes on
Mm.
Feminism, it was a personal essay on anger and where I went into detail about some of the personal things I felt angry about.
Yeah.
And I think, so I think book writing, but when it comes to public speaking, I can often get swept up by the moment, by the emotion, and I can just say something and think I would not, if I'd had time to reflect, have said that on a stage. And I need to work on that for sure.
I have 100% been known to cry on stages. Yeah. I cried
Have you? Oh, that makes me
conducting.
feel so much better.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Probably on littler stages, so it's like less consequential, but also I cried. So I on Friday last week, I interviewed Francis S. Collins. So he's an
Oh,
American
hello.
scientist. I know. He's an American scientist, and if you've ever done Alpha, you'll know his face and his voice because he's the scientist on week 1 of Alpha, right? I have done and led more Alphas than I know what to do with, so I felt like I knew this guy. But anyway, he was the big scientist, has worked as the director of National Institute for Health under Obama, Biden, and Trump. Only
Okay.
just resigned from that post, but we're talking like top level scientist. And he was the one who oversaw America's response to COVID, but more than that, the creation, the testing, and the distribution of the vaccines.
Oh,
And I know, big job. And he's written this lovely book, which I'll talk more about in a minute, kind of as a way to round this episode off. But basically, he was telling me the story, and I sobbed in an interview with Francis Collins, director of the National Institute for Health. Sometimes
wait,
it
hang
just
on. Is this
happens.
on Reenchanting?
It is. So it'll be out like closer to Christmas.
Are they going to edit out your crying?
I hope a little bit.
I hope they don't. I hope they don't, because I couldn't edit it out from my public speaking thing. So
Yeah, so it's
we need
only
to
fair.
face this together.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, as
But
I say as well, you can hear me say to myself, "Don't cry, Belle. Belle, you will not cry in front of Francis Collins. You will not do this. You will not do this." And then I
can you
did
give us
anyway.
a sort of brief, like, what was the vague
Yeah, it
premise
was
of?
him talking about what it felt like to have realized that that COVID vaccine was a success. So
Mm,
I know that this is divisive and some people will think different things, but he tells the story of working 100-hour weeks with his teams
mm,
and of everyone rallying together. And basically, you want a vaccine to be over 50% effective. A
mm,
really good vaccine is 70% effective. After
mm.
3 to 4 months of clinical trials, this vaccine came back as around 95% effective. And
Oh,
to hear his story of he was supposed to go out to all of the scientists, his teams and say, we've done it. And he couldn't because he was crying so much, thinking about the way that they had just turned this pandemic around in many ways and the amount of lives they'd saved. Like, I couldn't even imagine. And then I just thought back to like me at the time I was living in Pembrokeshire, Little West Wales. I thought back to me sitting in a leisure centre in rural West Wales, receiving the jab that he had helped to create, having no idea. He's a Christian, and he really details how much prayer he put into this vaccine, having no idea that I was sat there about to receive an answer to his prayer in many ways. You
mm,
know what I mean? And I just like the interdependence of us, the beauty of people
mm,
who fight for us and work for us, the way we're all
mm,
so connected. Even though he was in Washington and I was in West Wales, I was literally
mm,
getting the fruit of his 100-hour weeks. And it
mm.
all was just a bit much, Lauren. I just
It's so
couldn't hold it
funny
together.
coming through remembrance, right? I think that we're so prone, the human condition, we're so prone to forget, right? The franticness that I felt to have more freedom in that time, to have something that
Yeah.
meant that people I loved were protected, something that meant that I could have some semblance of a life back. And now we've kind of just snapped back to how things were. And the whole time we
Yeah.
were going, we'll never be the same. We will take the lessons we've learned here forwards. We are going to be a kinder, gentler, none of that's happened, right? But for those people, it almost feels to me like a war room. Like, that
Mm.
line, is it from Band of Brothers? Like, you don't know, you weren't there. Like,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
imagine thinking back to
Yeah.
that time, knowing the pressure and the strain of that,
Hmm.
and then feeling like, oh my gosh, we've done it.
Yeah.
That is immense,
Immense. Yeah.
immense.
And, it'll probably be looked back as one of the most incredible medical achievements
Yeah, yeah.
ever. Like the
To turn it around so
quickness,
quickly, yeah.
turn it around to distribute it so quickly. And, for someone like me in a leisure centre in rural West Wales to be have receiving it just months after
Mm,
all of it. just it just overwhelms me a little bit. And he's got this amazing book called The Road to Wisdom, and at the end of it he writes this benediction for wisdom. And I just feel like with everything that we've spoken about today, with everything that's going on, I feel like it would be a sweet way to round off our conversation.
Cool.
So he didn't write this. This is a benediction from, and by benediction, that's literally just a fancy word for prayer, written in 1985 by the Benedictine sister Ruth Fox. And this has been such a tangible prayer for me over the past week with everything that's going on. So he says, may God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and to turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world, so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. How good is that?
That's so good. You should write one of those. You should use that as a formula and write one. That's my challenge to you.
Okay,
I would love that. I think
consider it done.
Yeah.
Well, don't consider it done. Consider it mission received.
Consider it put on the end of your very long list of things to write. That is the perfect way to round this off. Thank you so much to think about. And we are back again next Wednesday with a bit different. We're doing a conspiracy theory special, and I can't wait.
I'm so excited. Pop culture conspiracy theories. We're going in.
There are people out there, guys. Chris has flagged up to us, producer Chris, that think that Pastor Joyce might be Elvis. I think it would be criminal not to dig into that. I think there's got to be space to let that one breathe and see what's going on.
The research for this is going to be my favorite research for any project ever.
Me too. Right. We will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in. Say bye, Belle.
Bye, Belle.